I will say one thing with that is that there is something called pre-exhausting the muscles. However, you need to be very careful with the movement that you choose. So like you were saying, you know, traditionally you wouldn't do leg extensions, which is a quad isolation movement before a back squat, especially a barbell back squat, because that is still especially if you focus it on your quads, it's still going to be a full body compound movement that takes stability and internal stability to be able to do that. However, there is, and we talk a little bit about this in the muscle transformation program, there are ways to, if you are someone who wants to like truly like you just want to build your quads, right? Like that is your main goal and you want to get as much out of that as possible. Then doing a pre-exhaust of like doing some leg extensions and then doing a movement after that, like a more lengthened movement is what a squat is when you're lengthening your quads versus a leg extension is your short. The most important part of that is the shortening, right? The squeezing at the top. However, you wouldn't want to you want to make sure that you're doing it as safely as possible, as you mentioned. So that would be like, okay, maybe I'll do a pre-exhaust leg extension, right? And then I'll do like a hack squat or a safety bar squat where I'm holding on. So I have more stability there. Yeah. So it's not necessarily better, but it actually can require you to use less weight on that second movement, right? Because your quads are already pre-exhausted, right? So you require less weight. Like if you were to go do a barbell back squat after you did a leg extensions, which this is something that you'd have to do very lightweight. And I would recommend more so using like a machine, like if you do a hack squat or like a safety bar squat or have somebody spot you, right? The benefit of it is that you can you pre-exhaust basically the muscle. It talks like what the word says, pre-exhausting your quads so that when you do go to that more, and this is more so thinking about how we're working our muscles through their ranges of motions and through their resistance profiles. So with a leg extension, it's hardest at the top when you're squeezing in that shortened position of your quad, right? And then a barbell back squat is hardest at the bottom when your quads are lengthened in their lengthened position, right? The stretch position you can think about. I like to call these squeezers and stretchers. So with that pre-exhaust, it can bring a little bit more blood flow, a little bit more metabolites into the quads and actually require you to use less weight on that barbell back squat again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend a barbell back squat, but any other type of compound movement where you're lengthening your quad. So it could be like a leg press, for example, that would be a better option, like doing a pre-exhaust with the leg extension and then going into a leg press machine where you have its own safety mechanism, right? Like if you fail on a leg press, you're okay. Like the bar's not going to come falling down on you, right? So, and again, this is more nuanced and it's more for your maybe more experienced person, right? But it's also something to think about, like if you are someone who doesn't really, perform barbell back squats well, and you don't feel your quads when you're doing them at all, maybe it's like, okay, maybe if I take the weight off significantly, and even if you're just doing the bar, right? If you do that after a leg extension, you can really focus on getting as much knee flexion in that lengthened position, versus kind of, putting a ton of weight on and your form's all over the place and you're like bouncing out of the bottom and you're not going low enough to really target your quads. So it all comes back to like what your main goal is and obviously how experienced you are and also how it's worked into the programming too. So a lot of these things too, like it would be part of the programming. And that's where people start to, like, I wouldn't just like take this and go do this randomly. You'd have to work it into like everything else that's going on.